Wow, what a story. It's incredible how one reckless moment can change everything. But now, we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love seeing how far our stories reach. And if you don't want to miss tomorrow's shocking new tale, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the comments. He laughed at the royal guard. Now he's crying behind bars. The morning sun bathed Buckingham Palace in a golden glow, casting long shadows across the square. The air buzzed with excitement as tourists from all over the world gathered, their cameras clicking, their voices blending into a soft hum of admiration. Among them stood Ryan Mitchell, a 42-year-old American tourist who had traveled to London with a couple of friends. Tall and broad-shouldered, Ryan carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He wore a bright red t-shirt, khaki cargo shorts, and a baseball cap turned backward, looking more ready for a backyard barbecue than a visit to a royal landmark. In one hand, he held a large 20-ounce coffee, its steaming contents swirling beneath a plastic lid. In the other, he gestured wildly as he cracked jokes, his voice carrying above the murmuring crowd. "Come on, look at these guys," Ryan scoffed, pointing at the royal guards lined up near the palace gates. "Are they even real? Or are they just wax figures from a museum?" A few nearby tourists chuckled nervously, but most turned away, sensing that his mockery wasn't in good taste. The guards, as always, stood motionless, their scarlet uniforms crisp, their tall black bearskin hats adding to their unshakable presence. Among them was Nathan Parker, a 26-year-old serviceman whose 6'2" frame stood tall with discipline. His face, like those of his fellow guards, remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed straight ahead, trained to ignore distractions. Ryan took a long sip of his coffee and smirked. "What's the point of having guards if they don't even move? We're the tourists. They should at least entertain us." His voice was loud enough for everyone around to hear. A woman standing beside him, clearly uncomfortable, leaned in. "Ryan, maybe you should stop," she whispered. "They're not actors. This is serious." But Ryan simply waved her off. "Relax, it's all part of the show," he said with a grin. As the crowd murmured, some tourists began recording, sensing that Ryan was pushing his luck. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. The air grew tense. Ryan wasn't just mocking the guards. He was about to take things way too far. And in a matter of moments, his harmless joke would turn into an international scandal. The crowd's murmurs grew louder as Ryan Mitchell took another bold step forward, his smirk widening. He had always enjoyed being the center of attention, and now, with several cameras pointed his way, he felt invincible. His eyes locked onto the nearest guard, Nathan Parker, who remained motionless, his posture rigid, his focus unshaken. The sun cast a glow on Nathan's stoic face, but if he felt the weight of Ryan's taunts, he gave no indication. Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, this guy's good. No reaction at all." He waved his hand in front of Nathan's face, snapping his fingers as if testing whether he was even real. The crowd shuffled uneasily. Some whispered, others recorded, waiting to see if Ryan would push the limits even further. "Come on, buddy," Ryan said, leaning in closer. "Are you even alive in there?" His words dripped with mockery, but the guardsman remained unyielding, his training stronger than any insult thrown his way. A tourist in the crowd called out, "Dude, leave him alone!" But Ryan ignored it, too caught up in his own game. Then an idea sparked in his mind, a way to break through the guard's stone-faced discipline. He lifted his coffee cup, still steaming from the heat. The rim hovered just inches from Nathan's face. "Maybe a little wake-up call will do the trick," Ryan muttered, his grin turning devious. The energy in the square shifted. The playful jeering turned to an uneasy silence. The tension thickened as people realized what was about to happen. "Ryan, stop!" his friend hissed, grabbing his arm. But he pulled away, eyes glinting with mischief. With a sudden flick of his wrist, Ryan tipped the cup forward. Scalding liquid splashed onto Nathan's face and uniform. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The dark stain spread across Nathan's crisp red coat as hot coffee dripped down his collar. The burn was immediate, the sting unmistakable. Yet, through sheer discipline, Nathan didn't flinch. His jaw tightened, but his body remained rigid, his eyes locked straight ahead. The crowd erupted in shock. Some stepped back, horrified. Others shouted in outrage. Phones captured every second. Ryan took a step back, laughing. "Well, now you can't ignore me," he said, grinning, until a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "Step away from the guardsman immediately." A Royal Guard officer was closing in, his expression deadly serious. Ryan's smug grin barely had time to settle before reality came crashing down around him. The sharp, commanding voice of the Royal Guard officer sliced through the chaotic murmurs of the crowd. "Step away from the guardsman immediately," the officer ordered, his voice steady but loaded with authority. For the first time, Ryan hesitated. He turned toward the approaching officer, a tall, imposing man with a chiseled jaw and piercing gaze. Unlike the still and silent guards, this officer was fully engaged, and there was no mistaking the seriousness in his stance. Ryan scoffed, still trying to play it off. "Oh, come on," he chuckled, lifting his hands in mock surrender. "It was just a little coffee. No harm, no foul, right?" But the crowd thought otherwise. People had stopped recording and started murmuring in anger. A woman near the front shook her head in disgust. A man muttered, "Unbelievable." Another bystander said under his breath, "He's going to regret that." Nathan Parker, the 26-year-old guardsman, still hadn't moved, but there was a barely noticeable tension in his jaw, a flicker of heat in his otherwise unreadable eyes. The steaming liquid had burned his skin, stained his uniform, yet he remained standing like a statue, unwavering in his duty. The officer took another step forward, closing the gap between himself and Ryan. "Sir, you have just assaulted a member of the Royal Guard in the execution of his duties. This is a criminal offense," he stated firmly. Ryan's smirk wavered. His arrogance, which had carried him this far, was suddenly met with something he hadn't expected, real consequences. "Oh, come on," he repeated, louder this time. "It was a joke. You're seriously going to arrest me for spilling coffee?" He let out a dry laugh, but the nervous edge in his voice betrayed him. The officer didn't blink. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Ryan's expression darkened. "You can't be serious," he said, shifting his stance. "This is ridiculous." But before he could argue further, two security officers moved in. The crowd parted as they approached, their presence sending a clear message. This wasn't up for debate. "Sir, do not resist," one of them warned. Ryan's bravado crumbled. His friend stood frozen, offering no help, no defense. He looked around, hoping for someone, anyone, to take his side. But all he found were disapproving stares and cameras capturing his downfall. The officer nodded, and in the blink of an eye, Ryan felt cold metal click around his wrists. He was under arrest. The cold metal of the handcuffs sent a jolt of reality through Ryan Mitchell's body. His arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a look of disbelief as the Royal Guard officer and two security personnel secured his wrists behind his back. The crowd around him had fallen into an eerie silence, save for the occasional whisper and the relentless clicking of cameras. The moment had shifted from a ridiculous prank to something far more serious. "You can't be serious," Ryan muttered, his voice now laced with panic. "This is insane! It was just coffee!" The officer didn't waver. "You have assaulted a member of the Royal Guard in the execution of his duties," he repeated. "You are under arrest." Ryan tried to twist his body, as if looking for a way out. His friend stood frozen, avoiding his desperate gaze. No one was stepping forward to defend him. As the officers led him toward a police van parked near the square, the crowd finally broke their silence. "He got what he deserved," a man in a navy blazer muttered. "Unbelievable," a woman near the front scoffed. What did he think was going to happen? More voices joined in, some whispering in agreement, others shaking their heads in disapproval. Phones were still recording, capturing every second of Ryan's humiliating downfall. Meanwhile, Nathan Parker, the 26-year-old guardsman, stood unwavering, his scarlet uniform stained with dark splashes of coffee. The burning sensation on his skin was unmistakable, but his posture remained perfectly rigid. The discipline drilled into him through years of training had prepared him for moments like this, to endure, to remain steadfast no matter what. A medic approached, carefully pressing a cold compress against Nathan's face. "Are you all right, son?" one of the higher-ranking officers asked in a low voice. Nathan nodded, his voice steady. "I'm fine. I can continue my duty." The response sparked something unexpected. A few people in the crowd clapped, then more joined in. Soon, the entire square echoed with admiration for the guardsman's composure. Ryan, now being pushed into the back of the police van, turned his head sharply. His face flushed with anger and embarrassment, but there was no one left to defend him. As the doors slammed shut, the reality hit him like a brick. This wasn't a joke. It was a crime, and he was about to face the consequences. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras flashing as Ryan Mitchell was led inside, his hands no longer in cuffs, but his face betraying the weight of reality. This wasn't a joke anymore. The viral footage of him throwing hot coffee on a royal guardsman had spread like wildfire, igniting debates across social media and news networks. Some called it an act of pure arrogance. Others questioned if the punishment fit the crime. But one thing was certain: he was in serious trouble. Across the courtroom, Nathan Parker, the 26-year-old guardsman, sat in full uniform. His face, though mostly healed, still showed slight redness where the scalding liquid had burned his skin. He remained calm, his posture as straight as ever, a symbol of discipline and duty. The contrast between the two men was striking. One, the embodiment of honor; the other, a man whose arrogance had cost him everything. The prosecution wasted no time. Video evidence played on a large screen, showing the exact moment Ryan tilted his coffee cup, the liquid spilling onto Nathan's face and uniform. The courtroom fell silent, watching the crime unfold once more. A witness took the stand, a middle-aged man who had been near the front of the crowd that day. "It was completely intentional," he stated firmly. "He mocked the guard, got closer and closer, and then he just dumped the coffee on him. It wasn't an accident. He wanted a reaction." A medical expert followed, confirming that while Nathan's burns were not severe, the psychological weight of the incident couldn't be ignored. Finally, Ryan himself was given the chance to speak. He shifted uncomfortably, his once confident demeanor now replaced by nervous desperation. "It was a joke," he said, his voice lacking the conviction it once held. "I didn't mean any real harm. I got caught up in the moment." The judge, an older man with a stern gaze, leaned forward and spoke slowly. "Your actions were not only unlawful but deeply disrespectful. These men stand in service to their country, upholding traditions that deserve honor, not ridicule." Then came the verdict. Ryan Mitchell, for the intentional assault of a royal guard and disturbing public order, you are sentenced to 6 months in prison. The courtroom gasped. Ryan's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. As he was led away, Nathan Parker remained still and composed, a quiet reminder that respect, once lost, can never be regained. What do you think about this shocking incident? Do you believe the punishment was fair, or do you think 6 months in prison was too harsh for what Ryan called just a joke? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This story has sparked debate all over the world. Some say the Royal Guard deserves the utmost respect, while others argue that tourists often don't realize the seriousness of their actions. What's your take? Have you ever witnessed something similar while traveling? And if you were in Ryan's shoes, how would you have reacted after realizing your joke had gone way too far? We love reading your comments, and your opinion truly matters. Whether you agree or disagree, let's have a conversation about respect, tradition, and personal responsibility. And don't forget, if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have another incredible story coming tomorrow, and you won't want to miss it. Now, tell us, was justice served? Drop your thoughts below.